Ciao, ti do il benvenuto alla quarta puntata della seconda stagione di Self-Tune Podcast e quest'oggi sono felicissima perché stai per assistere a una conversazione incredibile con una persona che oltre ad essere una persona di riferimento nel mondo del trattamento del trauma è anche un essere umano speciale e ci porterà in una conversazione molto profonda sull'uso del linguaggio, sul corpo e l'importanza degli strumenti che si possono utilizzare nella guarigione del trauma. È con noi oggi Licia Sky, che è la co-fondatrice della Trauma Research Foundation assieme a Bessel van der Kolk, autore di The Body Keeps the Score, il corpo accusa il colpo. E alla fine dell'episodio, come sempre, c'è una piccola pratica guidata che ti invito a seguire perché è un'esperienza veramente profonda che ti darà un assaggio del lavoro che fa Alicia, che non è una psicologa, ma ha veramente degli strumenti molto profondi per aiutare le persone a ritrovare la propria identità dopo un'esperienza di frammentazione dovuta dal trauma. Quindi senza aspettare altro, ti presento Liscia. E la puntata sarà in inglese, se la vuoi guardare sottotitolata, ti invito a cercare l'episodio sul canale YouTube, altrimenti ti invito semplicemente a sederti comoda o comodo e a iniziare questo bellissimo viaggio. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm very, very grateful to have you on this call. And for me, it means a lot. And so thank you for being here, just for your presence. And Licia, I'd like you to tell us a bit more about your story, if you...
I'm so delighted to be with you, Claudia. Thank you. My story, I have to go way back, actually, because I'm in the trauma world, but I come to the trauma world, I think, from my own personal experiences first, before there was any intellectual understanding about what trauma is. I had two parents who, as beautiful and intelligent as they were very traumatized people. My mother is Japanese, and she survived the firebombing of Tokyo when she was a very little girl, and then she was separated from her family for many years.
Wow.
And so violence, war, separation, those are all things that have a lasting mark developmentally on children. It affects them for the whole of their lives. And my father was an American Black man whose family was part of the Great Migration from the South to the North. Mm-hmm. And they lived on the south side of Chicago in a very poor and violent neighborhood. And his mother died when he was very young, and he was homeless when he was 13 and was part of gangs and joined the military in order to make a better life for himself. And so you have these two young people who met under extraordinary circumstances. He was on leave after World War II, no, after the Korean War, actually, in Japan, and met my mother. And they were both very beautiful, and they fell in love and eloped. And I was the product of that very, very, intense spark of marriage. Mm-hmm. And they had such good intentions, but they did not know what it meant to be in a respectful and kind relationship. And so there was turmoil and they were very violent with me. And by the time I was 12, I didn't want to be alive anymore. And I was trying to figure out how to die. And I, looking around, saw how messy all those ways were. And I just decided that I was going to demand from God that I not be here anymore. And miraculously, that wish was granted. And I had a pretty classic near-death experience where I left my body, went through a tunnel of colors and had life review, went into the light. And I wanted to stay there. It was such a loving, warm place. It was luminous. And I thought, this is who I am. Of course I belong here. And then all the light around me said, oh, you have so much work to do. You have to go back. And I was given a life preview where I saw myself almost as the person that I am now, which as a 12-year-old living in a very small, tight little life. I mean, I left out many details of how complex it was to be a multiracial person in a white dominant world. But I saw this big person on a big world stage, and I saw a globe that was the earth covered in lines of light. And I was told that those were my lines of travel around the earth connecting light. And I had no idea how I was going to become that person when I came back.
I saw that person.
Yeah. So that's a brief answer that I almost never give anybody because it's so far out there. But I began to practice yoga on my own. I found books. I meditated on my own. And somehow I felt called to become a body worker. I thought, what could I do that's a healing thing? Because I had no idea how to do what I'm doing now, public speaking and whatnot. But so I began to work with my hands. I began to intentionally develop an awareness of pain and healing. And that was a very inward process for me. It had more to do with listening to my own hands, listening with my own intuitive senses to the people that I was working with than technical skill. Technical things are very mechanical, and my way of listening to people's bodies has more to do with flow and resonating with someone and feeling empathy for what they must be feeling. Mm-hmm. And I found my way to being a very effective, successful body worker. And then I met Bessel van der Kolk about 11, 12 years ago. And he understood what I was doing with body work and yoga and breathing. And he was able to recognize painful experiences with this word trauma in a way that I had never connected before. I thought, oh, this is how people grow up. People do bad things to each other. But this word trauma has to do with the lasting impact of those harmful experiences. And he really showed me how important what I was doing was, and encouraged me to teach with him and to find language for what I'm actually doing so that other people could learn to do it too. And that's a challenging thing, finding language for wordless experience. It's always, for me, inward listening, inward listening, inward listening. And the action or the movement is flowing from that inward listening, from that information that we get inside ourselves. You know, if I said, how do you move your arm? You listen and say, what does it take? What movement, where in your body does it take to move your arm? It's something that's so deep and innate within us that we can't consciously know it anymore, even though maybe an infant that's just learning to open and close their hands might have that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that that little experience of reconnecting with motion that is primal is very important.
Yeah.
Intuitive.
So I've been teaching in workshops with Bessel for about 11 years now. And each year I teach a little bit more and a little bit more and have more language for wordless things. And I used to worry that I was too slow, that I was doing too little, but somehow I find that the slowest way is the vastest way, and that it has a very deep impact.
Yes.
So
the pauses. My yoga teacher, he's an Indian master, right? So for him, the actual jewel resides in the pause.
Yeah.
And
It's weird.
I was lucky enough to meet a style of yoga. I met him in 2005. I wasn't even thinking of becoming a yoga teacher at the time, but it touched me so deeply. And I have a little, it's a very different, of course, but my mum's British, as you might have. And my father's Italian. And I grew up in the 80s in Bologna, where like I was one of the very few children that had different origins. So I was also trying to work out, and both my parents had very traumatic existence. My mother was adopted very young, so she had that felt experience of being abandoned. And so I really resonate with many of the things you said, but when I encountered that experience of yoga as a healing practice, it just immediately clicked, and I have been practiced. So at the time I bought this DVD, I only had this DVD, and I would do that DVD every single day, and it would just bring me back to the experience of who I am, that is not the, unconscious reactions.
It's very much about slowing things down and knowing with clarity what you're feeling, knowing with clarity where your body is, how solid you are, how safe or not safe you are. And usually we're a lot safer than we think we are, unless we're in the middle of a war zone.
So I kind of believe that you are talking about one element that I found very interesting, which is the element of presence.
The thing about trauma, especially developmental experiences that are really harsh and painful and often brutal, is that children who are constantly learning, they're establishing their life habits. That's what childhood is about, is accruing the skills that you need to be successful in the world as an adult. And we accrue the skills according to the environment that we develop in, and with the assumption, I'm sure innately, that the environment we develop in is the one that we're going to exist in and have to thrive in as adults. And so children who learn that violence is around or that love is not available, they prune their need for love. They attenuate they put their attention on, where's the danger? What do I have to fight, and they develop nervous systems that can be extremely reactive, lightning fast, which might be what you need in an extremely violent environment. But it makes it very difficult to create a safer environment. It makes it very difficult to thrive in a safer environment, to be able to collaborate, cooperate, have good social connections that make us able to make a good life, make us able to make peace. And so, so trauma is about having your social ability and your social connection and your access to love really cut short. And the things that we think of as safe, that some people say, oh, just be positive, oh, just love, those are the things that to a person who grew up in a dangerous environment might be the most dangerous things of all to even want, let alone try and approach and make a reality. It would mean having to put down all the defenses that you've practiced in order to become a safer person. It might mean, if you've been ready to fight all your life, that you have to learn a way of being safe without fighting. And that might be terrifying. Even sleep. Sleep is something that you have to be safe to do. Sleep is something where you have to trust the universe and let your body be completely defenseless. And people who have trauma often have really, really terrible sleep patterns. Yeah.
I actually started not sleeping properly when I was a child. My father was an academic, so he traveled a lot for his work. And when I was left alone with my mom, I wouldn't sleep. So it was a very unpredictable environment for me, and it was and I have this idea that being addicted to the stress level becomes your natural way of responding, and it takes a lot of work to get rid of that, or not get rid of it, but even just to be aware that that is an actor at play in your experience, right?
Right. And it, when we're, I don't know if I would use the word addicted, but if what we're seeing, if what we're primed to see is danger, 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 then we're missing all these opportunities, and we're missing all these choices that we could make to be different, to live a different way. You know, and I think type A workaholic kind of people who are busy, busy, busy and feel like, oh, I'm thriving, I'm supercharged, I'm successful in this way. That might be the case, but it also might be that they're missing more personal connections and the time that it takes to make those personal connections of a family life or deep friendships or art and beauty. And there might be another way of thriving that doesn't amp up and stress the body so much. When our bodies are stressed all the time, our health can deteriorate, can decline, whether we're in a dangerous situation or not. If our body is always reacting that way, it takes a toll. And the space that it takes to pause even for a moment for somebody who feels innately that they need to be busy, 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 intense, intense, intense in order to be all right, to stay on top of their game, so to speak. That quiet moment can feel so loud and overwhelming, so huge that they want to avoid it at all cost. Because often what opens up in that quiet moment is an intensity of feeling that they've been avoiding knowing about even.
Of course. So
Yeah.
um, I'd like you to help me and my audience understand, how does the body fit in, you know, with a more traditional therapy? What's your take on this? Of course, we've all read The Body Keeps the Score, but
Yeah.
I'd like your, you know, your experience and your wisdom around the importance of taking care of the body first, not first,
Yeah.
but together with other.
Yeah, there for me, there isn't really a separation between our bodies and our minds. You know, there's this continuum of awareness that we have of everything that's inside us and outside us. And and culturally, we live in a very, very small bubble. Culturally, there's so many things around us that we must filter out in order to fit in this culture that we live in. And I think one of the ways that you would notice that is if you visit a place that has a different culture, you'll notice that people in different cultures see different things, hear different rhythms. That's why there's different music. That's why the language of music is different, and the music of different is different, and sense of color is different, and sense of food is different, and spiritual practices are different. So different cultures perceive and interact with the world in very different ways. And in a culture that has historically been predominantly European in its orientation, the body as a religious thing, as a way of controlling people, it's just been completely pushed down. The body's been denigrated and separated from everything that's sacred in creation. But our bodies
Also, we
are
have the
part,
Cartesian
right,
dualism that
right.
we all live in that separation. I mean, even if we're not really aware of it, I mean, the way we, in Italy especially, I mean, I think in Europe in general, we are raised with a school system that is all about the mind, the mind, the mind, and the body is just a piece of mechanism that you attach to your superior thing, which is the mind.
Right, right. And then, you know, you put, I hate to say this, but you put capitalism on top of that. And then everything that's not working collectively towards generating wealth for somebody else is down, it's lesser than. And so all this sensuality and beauty, say, of Italian culture, when I think of food and art and music, that's 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 below our money making. That's not the priority. And the flourishing of our communities and families and well-being is not as important
And there's a
functionally.
big separation in Italy
Yeah,
geographically between the north and the south. In the
yeah,
north, the families are very small. You know, many of the people move to different cities for work, you know, to work.
yeah,
So that you have just your immediate family, father and mother, or, you know, parents with a child, parent one, parent two with a child, and you don't have that whole community, which is actually, it's actually very part of the history. So 50 years ago in Italy, children were raised in a more communal system. Even in Milan, you see the structure of the buildings. We have this area within the building, which is an inside protected, and the children would play all together. So one mother would keep an eye. And now, I mean, during COVID, I live in a building that has that area, but no
yeah,
one would think of, you know, doing it because, you know, I close the door and my neighbor, I don't even, you know, it's changed, and it's very much, you know, different between the north. There is a big difference between the north and the south, and especially a city like Milan, which is, I mean, the headquarter of capitalism in Italy. There's the you know, the stock exchanges in Milan. all the communication agencies are in Milan, the fashion is in Milan, the design is, so it's an economic capital.
Right. And so we're further removed from our innate humanity when the things that help us to be connected with each other are devalued, then we are devalued. So the practice is, how do we come back to value ourselves, respect ourselves, develop a relationship with our whole being? And you know, even in cultures that are collective, there's this way that we have to respect our bodies, that our taking care of our body is a responsibility that nourishes the relationships around us. The healthier we are, the more we can support other people to be healthy. And you know, I know in American culture, loneliness is a thing that is growing and growing and growing. More people living alone, being disconnected, not knowing how to reach out, not knowing how to co-create experiences where joy can happen between friends, between family, between co-workers. It's not there. But the thing that I think we've lost a sense of, or maybe the thing that we could discover, is how to start with a relationship with ourselves again. How to, you know, the thing that I think many people don't have is kindness, gentleness and kindness. And it sounds like such a simple little thing that you could just swat it away and say, oh, that's not important. You don't need kindness to survive. But it's something very essential to life.
Yeah, if I may go back to the experience that you were telling me, and which for me is very deep and actually very important that you shared. I am a meditator. Like, for me, meditation is the practice. I mean, I do breath work because pranayama, because it's conducive to. There are some days when I step up from my little area where I meditate, I have this, you know, expansive feeling. I want to thank everyone. I'm grateful. I find the beauty even in the simplest thing. And I write messages to people who probably think I'm completely crazy because I just feel. And so the spiritual, so how is it important to cultivate that relationship with ourselves through a spiritual practice, which could be even just even an asana practice. I mean, whoever finds whatever helpful, you know, because that, when you are connected to your true, real, unlimited identity, then that's when you experience those expansive feelings of.
Right. You know, for so many of the people that I work with who have deep, especially childhood trauma, the notion of love and kindness towards themselves just seems like an impossible ideal. They quite literally loathe themselves and blame themselves for the pain in their lives, as if somehow they were responsible for every bad thing that happened to them, as if they deserved it, as if they were somehow asking for it. And this is especially true of people who've been sexually abused, because that line of closeness between affection and sexuality, which a child would not know, and how coming towards affection and comfort could become a violation that they would end up blaming themselves for, and think that love is the most dangerous thing. I don't even talk about love to start off with, but I think that respect and kindness are the seeds of love. that we can be curious about. And so when I'm guiding people to pay attention to themselves differently, those are the words that I use because they're less charged. How much respect can you have for yourself? How much kindness or regard? The reason I use those words is because worthiness is an existential question, and respect is an acknowledgement of your worthiness to be in the world. And kindness is a show of respect for the person that you're with. And so if I'm inviting someone to pay attention to themselves for the first time, I invoke the notion of respect and kindness because I want to know, I want the person that I'm working with to be curious about their sense of worthiness, to be alive. I mean, that was my existential question when I was a child. Do I belong here? And how respect is the first way of welcoming a person into the world. Respect and kindness. And that's a very specific kind of love that says, I hold you in regard. You belong here.
Mm-hmm. This is very powerful shift in language. And we are people, I mean, we use language and there's no way out of it. So definitely this is a very important aspect of, and you know, most of the time you don't really know. I mean, I not being a psychologist, people come to me and I don't ask them to tell me anything about their traumatic experience, because I want to build a relationship that comes through the practice together, the experience, the shared experience, the language. But what you just taught me, I'm really grateful, because it's actually a very important and fundamental shift, because sometimes even beautiful words, not everyone has had the opportunity to embody them, and so they become alien and become something that it's inaccessible. So
right. And you know, affirmations work if they're authentic to you. If they're from the outside, affirmations are sometimes a thing that you can fail at miserably because it's not true for you. And so often the people that I work with, even offering kindness is like, oh, that's not for me. That's not for me. I don't belong here. I don't deserve respect. But that's just the basic fundamental thing that should be our birthright. That so returning to a very, very basic place, and for me, I've learned that telling a story about what happened is not the thing that makes you better. You know, the story about what happened is the story about what led me to believe that I don't belong here, what led me to believe I'm not worthy. And at some point in going through everything, it might emerge that you remember something that you didn't before, and that might be helpful. But really, what's much, much more helpful is understanding, what kind of relationship do I have with myself right now? And maybe how did what happened back then affect how I am right now in this place where I am right now? And in order to understand that, we have to understand more fully what is right here, right now? What is my body like right here, right now? What are these walls around me and the ceiling above me like right now? And how does this space that I'm in feel right now? And so I start with the tiniest check-ins of like, what does it feel like to sit in your seat? That's pretty much the most basic thing that every meditation starts with is feel your bum in your chair. What's that like? What is that little bit of contact like? But we have mudras. You could say, feel your fingertips pressing each other. What does that feel like right there? Or take a breath in. What does it feel like when you take a breath in? What's happening inside your body as this sponge of your lungs absorbs oxygen, and somehow that motion pushes all the carbon dioxide out of your blood, and then you exhale through your lungs the gases that your body has used. How does that feel? What do your muscles feel like in your body? What does your spine feel like? And we follow things in a way where we're curious and open, and we get to notice. Maybe we notice that, oh, I've been holding myself very still. What happens if when I breathe, I allow my spine to move? What happens if when I breathe, I allow my chest to rise up just a little bit? What happens if I feel my weight shifting in my seat from side to side? And I love how you're wiggling with me.
Yeah, because I actually I find myself, and
Yeah,
honestly, like I know that of course I've built the awareness, and actually all the practices that I have helped me very much navigate the challenges, especially in the last year. But I know that for me, the rocking is
yeah,
such a self-soothing thing, and I find myself doing it a lot and feeling, the weight going from one cheek about
yeah,
to,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know.
That's our sense of balance.
Mm.
And when you put your weight on one side of your body, everything else has to shift slightly to accommodate that. Our sense of balance is so deeply within us because we learned and practiced it from infancy until we could walk and run. That's the thing that we master first. We master balance before we master language. Our sense of gravity and our relationship to gravity is one of the first things. That it's not something that you get a manual for and you get to read how to balance. It's this exploration. Our
Yeah.
little scientist baby bodies are figuring out this very complex thing. And then we get to take it for granted.
Yeah, I remember my son. I mean, he was very physical, and he learned to crawl backwards because we were living in an apartment that had steps. So the first
Yeah,
time he bumped his face, and I was, oh, then he learned, he turned around and just crawled backwards. So
yeah, yeah.
imagine the sense of, being able to figure that out without having any language to go with it.
Isn't that amazing? I actually had stairs in my house with my first child, and it wasn't too many stairs, but he was so good at getting up them, and I would pull him and make him practice going backwards because I didn't want him to fall. Yeah, yeah. And then they do this thing where they hang on and they cruise and they're mastering where's the center of my body. Well, and they're learning what happens if I lean this way. What happen, that they learn to tighten one side of their body or not tighten one side of their body. And what do I have to do to lift my arm without falling over? There's so many complex things that are innate to us now
Mm.
that weren't when we first came into the world. And love is something that is innate to babies. Babies are loving, reciprocal creatures. they imitate, they respond, they make sounds back, they make eye contact, they imitate facial expressions, and everything about them is geared towards making more and more connection with the beings around them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what babies are for.
Yeah,
And
my
that's what most of us love.
my
Yeah.
daughter having this, she was mirroring all the time. She
Yes.
would dance, like when there was music, I was, maybe moving, and she would do the same, like sitting down. So yes, it was
Yeah.
very, very beautiful experience. So, Licia, conscious of the time,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would like to, first of all, again, thank you so much. For me, this has been a very beautiful experience altogether, which I'll probably reflect on and make sense on for long days to come. But I would like to invite you, if you could, to offer, just a little short presencing practice to close our time together, if that's
Sure,
okay.
sure. Um, you know, I would like to try one that's more active, if that's all right with you.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we'll start by just feeling our bums in our chairs again. I'm sitting in a chair, and I just invite you to take a snapshot of your body internally, as if you could take a photograph. What's happening in your body? How's your balance in your body? Is there weight evenly distributed between one hip and the other? How still or not still do you feel? And if there's anything that you would like to shift in order to be more comfortable, I invite you to pay attention to and allow yourself to shift in whatever way you need to be comfortable. And all my words are an invitation for you to choose what's right for you or not. And the most important thing is to be able to notice what comes up for you. What's this like for you in this moment? But from this place of just noticing your bum in your chair, and maybe noticing how much weight goes down to your feet, what kind of contact do you have? You just take a moment to feel your spine rising in space in the back of your body, and the volume of your body in front of your spine, around your spine. How large or small do you feel right now in space? Just invite you to notice, sense, or imagine how large or small you are. And then maybe with the next couple breaths in and out, I invite you to just feel how much larger you feel with an inhale, how much smaller you might feel with an exhale. I invite you to just place one hand on your belly, on your stomach. I like to place my hand over my belly button. What's that like for you? What do you feel? What comes up, even with the invitation to hold your belly? Some people have a very hard time with that. Many feelings, positive or not so positive, about their bellies. How do you feel about your belly and this invitation to make contact? What does your hand feel? Maybe you feel your clothing. Maybe you feel the softness or firmness of your belly. I wonder, do you have a different sense of how large or small you are now that your hand is on your belly versus what you felt like before when I asked you how large or small you felt? And then I invite you to notice, what does your belly feel with your hand on your belly? Do you feel pressure? Do you feel temperature? Do you feel it only on the surface of your skin? Or do you feel something further inward? How far inside you can you notice, sense, or imagine this contact of your hand on your belly? And I invite you to notice how your belly might expand a little as you breathe in, and how it might go in again a little bit as you breathe out. So just feel your breath and that movement and that contact. And with the next breath in and out, I invite you to place your other hand on your heart or your chest. And just notice what this hand feels as it makes contact with your chest. What's this like? How large or small do you feel in space? What's the texture of your clothing? What's the firmness or softness of your chest? You might feel the rise and fall of your chest as you inhale and exhale. And for some of you, you might be able to notice faintly the sensation of a thud, thud, thud as your heart beats in your chest. You might be able to notice, sense, or imagine how quickly or slowly your heart is beating. You might be able to notice, sense, or imagine the two rhythms of your breath and your heartbeat. I invite you to notice, sense, or imagine what your chest feels, what your heart feels with your hand resting here this way. What's comfortable or uncomfortable about holding your belly and holding your chest. I invite you to notice what your breath does in response to this holding. How far inside your chest can you feel this contact? This is listening in, just paying attention to what's happening for you right now. I invite you to slowly just notice that you happen to be holding somebody. The sensation of holding a person, that both hands are here in a way that's almost like an embrace. And I invite you to notice how you feel towards this person that you are holding. And I invite you as much as possible to hold an intention of respect and kindness towards this person that you're holding. And I invite you to notice that you are also being held by someone. The sensations of being held by these two hands, these two arms, by someone who's been invited to hold an intention of respect and kindness toward you. I invite you to notice what it's like to have that intention of respect and kindness toward you, and how much respect and kindness are you able to receive from this person who is holding you. It's a moment of curiosity, a moment of breathing, a moment of feeling, of maybe not being sure of the answer for all these questions, maybe wondering and feeling the physical sensations of being held. What's comfortable, what's uncomfortable, what's beautiful or what's scary. And I invite you to follow your breath, the sensations of air moving in and out of your nose or mouth, maybe through your sinuses in the back of your throat. I invite you to hear the sounds of your breath, inside your body and outside your body. And with the next few breaths in and out, I invite you to slowly have your hands float away from your body and maybe feel the sensations that remain in your body as your hands float away. Maybe you feel the sense of temperature change in your chest and your belly, in your hands. There might be a cooling that happens, but maybe there's a shadow or a resonance of this contact of holding. What do you still feel or notice or imagine? And I think that might be all we have time for. So I invite you to come back into the room that you're in. Yeah, just a little bit of squeezing, a little bit of looking around and seeing where you are. Yeah, a little bit of wiggling, a little bit of being here differently. And I hope that was enough of a little excursion inward.
This was beautiful, lovely, juicy in my experience. So thank you, Licia, for being here. And I invite everyone to go and find you on the Trauma Research Foundation website to explore all the amazing work that you do, especially in training people to do this work in the world. And thank you again for practicing with me, actually talking with me.
Claudia.